Hi everybody, my name is Julia Raykovicz and I'm a freshman here at U of SC. I'm a nursing major and I hope to be a labor and delivery nurse when I'm older. I hope to be a travel nurse right after I graduate here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about eating disorders and how they are related to the field of psychology. I'm also going to be talking about the effect that social media has on eating disorders. This topic really does kind of hit home for me, and I think it's so important to talk about and learn why it's so prevalent in today's society. Talking about eating disorders can really help spread awareness and show how much an effect social media has on adolescents and our brains. To begin with, eating disorders are very common. They usually occur in more wealthy countries, and they affect up to 2% of women and about 0.08% of men. An eating disorder can be defined as a consistent pattern of eating habits that can lead to poor mental and physical health. The main eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, pica, and rumination disorder. Disordered eating habits can stem from a variety of different things, but they usually stem from concerns of weight and body image. They are most common among adolescents. Now, looking in from the outside, it can be hard to understand what an eating disorder actually is. Why would a person want to starve themselves to death? Why would a person want to binge on food until their stomachs physically can't take in any more food? Why would a person want to make themselves throw up? All of these are very good questions, but none of which have a simple answer. To understand the answers behind these questions, we have to look at the psychology of eating disorders. To fully grasp this idea, we have to acknowledge that eating disorders serve as a purpose to the person who has one. I mean, after all, we have learned in this class that all behavior exists because it gets reinforced by something. So all eating disorders like anorexia and like binge eating can be better understood by looking at the reinforcement people get out of it. The first example of reinforcement could be the most evident one, and this would be weight loss. I know when I was going through my eating disorder, I would step on the scale every single morning, and if I had lost weight, it would have been considered a good day. If I had gained weight or even stayed the same, I would go kind of into a depressive state and my mood would be altered tremendously. And I really wouldn't be able to think about anything else the rest of the day. I was reinforced almost every single day just by stepping on that scale and watching that scale go down. Not only did this tell me what I was doing was working, but it also reinforced the idea that if I kept doing this and if I kept cutting calories, I would keep getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. If I had gained weight, that would let me know that that day I would have to eat less calories until eventually it was cut to no calories at all. Another form of reinforcement could be the words of your community. After I had lost 50 pounds in a matter of a couple months, people obviously did start to notice. Day by day, I would get compliment after compliment, basically assuring me of all my insecurities that I did look better, skinnier, and I got reinforcement from boys too. They started to look at me more, they started to talk to me more. My parents, they encouraged me because, I just looked so healthy. My soccer coach thought I was in the best shape of my life, when ultimately I was pretty much at the worst shape of my life. Another form of reinforcement I would like to talk about kind of has to do the most with psychology, and that is the chemicals in your brain. When I first started recovering from anorexia, I really started struggling with binge eating disorder. It was because I was eating more in recovery, so obviously I had gained more weight, I had gained some weight back, and my body image was at an all-time low. And the only thing that made me forget about how sad I was eating, and the only thing that was making me sad was eating. So it was kind of just like this continuous, exhausting cycle. But when you binge eat, studies do show that the neurotransmitter dopamine is released. This causes you to feel happy and numb to your other emotions. The reinforcement of happiness from binge eating at the moment is enough to continue to do it. To understand eating disorders better and how the chemicals work in our brain, we are going to be looking at a study done by the National Institutes of Health. Now, during this study, researchers have found that eating disorders alter the brain's reward response process and food intake control. Researchers have found that eating disorder behaviors do alter the brain's reward response process and food intake control, which can lead to these reinforcing behaviors of eating disorders. If we understand the neurobiology of eating disorders, it can shed light on why these eating disorders often become chronic. It can help in the future of developing treatments for it as well. According to Janani Prahakar, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I hope I am, of the Division of Translational Research of Mental Health, he quotes, "This work is significant because it links biological and behavioral factors that interact to adversely impact eating disorders." She states that, quote, "It deepens our knowledge about the underlying biological causes of behavioral symptom presentation related to eating disorders, and it will give researchers and clinicians better information about how, when, and with whom to intervene." So this study was actually done at the University of California in San Diego. Researcher Guido Frank and his colleagues, they wanted to see how behaviors across the eating disorder spectrum, so from anorexia to binge eating to pica to rumination, all of those different disorders. He wanted to see how these affected the reward response circuit in the brain. He wanted to see if these changes in reward response alter food intake control circuitry. Do these chemicals in the brain change the way our bodies feel hunger cues, and if we're able to suppress them, and after a while, if this can lead to more of the eating disorder patterns that we often see, and if these changes in these neurotransmitters reinforce eating disorders. So the study enrolled 197 women with different eating disorders and different weights associated with these different eating disorders. They also had a control group, which was 120 women without eating disorders as well. The researchers did a cross-sectional study by studying images of the brain in response to a taste reward task. So during this task, participants received or they were denied a sweet stimulus, which could be sugar or anything else related to food. The researchers then analyzed the brain reward response, which is known as prediction error. This is where a dopamine signaling process is measured to see how surprised a person was receiving the unexpected sweet stimulus. Researchers found that there was no correlation between BMI and the eating disorder behavior. This was in the group of women that did not have tendencies of eating disorders, so there was no correlation. Their brains didn't react any differently to the sweet stimulus. There was no neurotransmitters that were different. Nothing else was released. But in the group of women with eating disorders, there was a correlation between having an eating disorder and their dopamine levels, their hypothalamus, and feeling out of control after eating. So that means they had a very high prediction error. So the results from the study suggest that women with eating disorder behaviors and extreme weight loss or weight gain have modified dopamine levels in their brain. This is related to the reward circuit response. Basically means that this alters the brain's circuitry associated with food, which can potentially lead to reinforcing these eating disorder behaviors and patterns. So this allows these women to override their hunger cues, but people with binge eating, quite the opposite. They could have lower food intake control circuitry, so it kind of counteracts each other. In the same study, Dr. Frank said, quote, "This study provides a model for how behavioral traits promote eating problems and changes in BMI, and how eating disorder behaviors, anxiety, mood, and brain neurobiology interact to reinforce the vicious cycle of eating disorders, making recovery very difficult." In conclusion, this study shows that behavioral traits can contribute to eating disorders, and it also shows how the brain's internal reward response and food intake control can be modified and changed by these eating disorders, and they can also impact eating disorders and how severe and how hard recovery is. It quite literally changes your brain's chemistry. And not only have there been many studies done about eating disorders, in psychology. There has also been many news articles that have been written about eating disorders, and specifically how social media has affected adolescents and our brains, and how we think, how we go just about our everyday lives. So I'm going to be talking about a news article which was written by the New York Times, and in this article they talk about different Senate subcommittee hearings that has happened over the past couple weeks. There was one featuring Facebook, the Facebook executive actually, and she was defending her company. And the second one was a former Facebook employee that stated Facebook's products can drive some young people towards eating disorders. So according to Senator Richburg, a Democrat of Connecticut, she, quote, "Big tech's exploiting these powerful algorithms and design features is reckless and heedless. It needs to change. They seize on the insecurities of children, including eating disorders, simply to make money." So according to this news article, social media proves to have a negative impact on adolescents' brains and explicitly promotes eating disorders. Influencers and celebrities who are in fashion, beauty, fitness have also been found guilty of promoting these eating disorders as well. Like I talked about before, and reinforcement and psychology, which we've learned about specifically in chapter 4 when we talked about the health of ourselves and our brain and the effect the outside world like social media can have on us. Social media does have a reinforcing nature to it. It activates the brain's reward center by releasing dopamine, and the creators of these platforms are specifically designed them to be addictive. Along with the addictiveness of this, they are associated with anxiety, depression, and obviously a spectrum of eating disorders as well. So obviously we are all guilty of using social media. It is definitely a way to boost self-esteem and ways to fit into our community. But along with that comes comparison. So I challenge you to think about this. Have you ever posted on social media and you're like, oh my gosh, like how many likes did I get? Well, why didn't he like my post? Do I look fat in this? Should I delete this? What are my friends gonna think? How many comments am I gonna get? Human beings are constantly on this quest of validation, and the internet does replace some of these connections people could have in real life. Studies have shown that social media has affected our brain in many ways. Increase your sleep, which is also associated with depression, memory loss, and poor academic performance. It can also rewire your brain's synapses into an eating disorder behavior and thoughts, and physical ailments like nausea, headaches, and muscle tension. But given the results of the study and the news article, I think I would conduct a study where we have two different groups of people. So we would randomly select a group of adolescents from a college campus. Both groups would have all of them would have some kind of eating disorder. One group would be the control group, so they would go about their everyday lives as they would, and then every week for a month they would come in and we would scan their brains, analyze their brains, and record the neurotransmitters and how their brain is working. And the other group, we would ask them to delete all forms of social media, and again they would come in once a week for a month, and we would also examine their brain pattern waves and neurotransmitters that are transmitted throughout those couple of weeks. We would analyze this data and compare it. I do believe the results of this experiment will prove that adolescents who deleted social media with eating disorders would have a decrease in depression, anxiety, physical ailments, and they would have less eating disorder patterns. Obviously, this wouldn't cure their eating disorder. I think it would be a huge leap. It'd be very interesting just to kind of analyze and look at. It is very evident that our world today is controlled and consumed by our phones. So my parents did grow up in an age where they didn't have cell phones and social media, and I truly believe they were happier and healthier mentally and physically. They didn't have Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, sit on all day to just scroll through social media for countless hours and compare themselves to literally every single human being out there. And not only did they not have to compare themselves to normal, average people online, they didn't have to compare themselves to celebrities, athletes, influencers, and the biggest thing is Photoshop. I think it would be important to share my reaction, what I found out in the studies and how this has affected my life. And I feel like if I knew back then that it was kind of more of a biological and psychological thing, that it would have helped me tremendously. Getting that reinforcement of feedback, oh my gosh, you look amazing. It was just the fuel I needed to keep starving myself. Honestly, beforehand, I wasn't too fat, I wasn't too slow, I wasn't too big, but 6 months later, 60 pounds down and hospitalized, that was when I had a problem. A lot of that did come from social media, but a lot of it did come from neurotransmitter levels going through my head. I rewired my brain to start acting in a pattern. According to the New York Foundling, Dr. Ruth Gerson, who is a vice president for mental health services, states, Instagram and other image-based social media apps trigger a mental state that's been called compare and desire. She says that social media use in adolescence is leading to high rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal rates. I truly do believe that without social media, we would mentally and physically be so much happier. I do hope I shed some light on eating disorders by talking about my personal experiences and how biologically it affects your brain. This has been a passion of mine for a while, and I really do hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and amazing rest of your semester. And so I will see everybody later, maybe on the streets of Columbia. Bye!